Welcome to the AXPONA Audio Insider Podcast. My name is Lenny Florentine, and I have a really cool guest today. So you guys are going to love this because if you've ever been to AXPONA or any other audio show, there's one speaker that stands out to everybody, and that's the MBLs, right? And today I have Jeremy from MBL here to talk about just that. What is up, man? How are you?
Hi, Lenny. Thanks for having us.
This is interesting because I've seen it all the time at every show. Everybody's always talking about your product just because they're so unique. But you don't just have speakers; you have a whole line of product, and we'll get into that. But before we do, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this industry?
Boy, so I've been involved in the hobby since I was a early teenager. I had an uncle who was an audiophile back in the day, and he worked at a hi-fi store while he was in college and law school as a salesman. So I grew up, hanging out with him. He was a bachelor most of my young life, so he had all the cool toys, the stereo equipment and the pen collection, the watch collection, all that kind of stuff. So I spent a lot of time with my uncle and got really excited about hi-fi and involved in hi-fi, and spent all my money mowing lawns and washing cars to get my first components together. Then I became a DJ when I was in high school for local area youth groups that I was involved in, and tinkered with building my own equipment and light setups and things like that. So when I was in college, a buddy of mine who I had also introduced to the hobby, I'm from California. We were living in Los Angeles at the time, and he was reading one of the magazines and read about the Consumer Electronics Show that was taking place in Las Vegas every January. And he said, "Let's go." And I'm like, "Dude, we're kids. This is a trade only show. We're not in the industry. They probably won't even let us in." So we took a road trip and took a chance, and ended up kind of weaseling our way into the show. And we were like kids in the candy store, and just got to see every brand we'd ever heard of, and met the designers, and just had a blast. And there was a small company from Denmark called Primary Systems, which still exists. And they had a very exotic high-end system on display there that we just fell in love with, and met the designer, and the young engineers were younger guys. So we hung out and became friends with them and went back to our lives. And then the next year we came back again. And Primaire, the guy had split off from Primaire and started his own little small high-end company called Bow Technologies. And they had a small integrated and a CD player that would fit perfectly in my college apartment. And I wanted to get them. And they didn't have distribution in North America at the time. So by the end of the CES, I was the distributor for this Danish brand. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then at an exhibition a little while later, MBL was exhibiting in the room next door to my exhibit, coincidentally. So I met the MBL folks, and the engineer was also, a younger guy, and we became fast friends. And I loaned them one of our CD players to use at the show because they didn't have their CD player at the time finished. We're going way back into the mid '90s now. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then MBL came after me to come work for them, and I have been on and off for 25 years.
So CES nowadays, if people haven't heard of that, it's the biggest consumer electronics show in the country. But in the '90s, it was probably a lot different than it is now, because
Absolutely.
now it's not just audio and video; it's just all kind of stuff. And in the '90s, it was probably a lot more audio related stuff in the '80s at these shows.
Absolutely.
So how was CES in the '80s and '90s? How would you describe what it was?
Well, CES was kind of the mecca for high end audio, really for the world. It was really an international show. There were brands there, like I described, that had no distribution or business even in North America, that come from Europe, came from Asia. It was really an international show, and all the business was being done there in Vegas, even if there wasn't distribution within the United States for the brands. All the buyers and distributors and press pretty much descended on Las Vegas for this show. And the high performance audio, which was the sector that CES divided us up as, was in the Sahara Hotel, which was a nice venue, and we were isolated, so we were on our own and weren't competing with, the Microsofts, the Sonys, the car stereo, the AVN. So it was really the mecca, and it was the only game in town. There was maybe Stereophile magazine would once in a while have a show, a consumer show, but in terms of the actual industry and trade show, the CES was pretty much the only game in town, at least until the early 2000s. And then it became very fragmented, and they moved us from a hotel that was off the strip called the Alexis Park, where we were only high-end audio, so it was very concentrated. And they moved us into the Venetian Hotel and stuck us up at the top in the 33rd through the 35th floors, and it was very difficult to get there or find it, and the rest of the show kind of stuck us off in the corner. So it became so expensive and so difficult to navigate. We're competing with the big brands, the mass market brands, for hotel rooms and taxis and restaurants. So for small companies, like most of the sort of cottage industry that we're in the high end, it just didn't make any sense. And then all at the same time, there were regional shows like AXPONA that were popping up around North America. And these made more sense for us because they were targeted at the consumer audience. So now we have a captive audience of people who have sought this out specifically and made their plans to come to these, for the public and the consumer shows, where they could come to a specific place and a specific location and only see high-end audio. You don't have to navigate through all the other circus that was going on with the larger convention that we were just a tiny part of.
So when you first saw MBL at CES, do you remember what system or what products they had on display at that time?
Absolutely. Remember it like it was yesterday. It was probably in 1994, maybe. It was the 101, which is sort of the iconic loudspeaker from MBL. It features this silver driver that's behind me here. That's the mid woofer driver there, and then the black one here is the mid range, and then there's a small one here that's the tweeter. This is the extreme version, so there's a mirror array of the drive units, but this grouping, the tweeter, mid range, and woofer, that's sort of the MBL iconic and unique product. The concept was patented in '79, and it took them 6 years to actually get it to function in the real world, with a very brilliant engineer named Jürgen Reis. And I met Jürgen at the show and walked in and saw this thing that just looked like, from another world, honestly. And I was considering becoming a loudspeaker designer myself. I had explored making cabinets and driver manufacturers in Denmark and cabinet manufacturers in Denmark, and really was considering making a go of it as a designer myself. And then I saw and heard this MBL strange looking thing, and I was just stunned. It was kind of an I surrender moment for me. I couldn't even imagine something like this, and they've already made it work, which was absolutely revolutionary and radical compared to every other product in the marketplace, and remains so today. There have been competitors who have tried to mimic the omnidirectional radiation pattern, which is what is unique to the MBL loudspeaker, but those only share the radiation pattern similarity. These are actually the drivers that are pulsating spheres, so they are putting sound 360 degrees in the horizontal plane, and you can see they're curved at specific arcs, so they're also firing 10 to 30 degrees up and down. So I heard this speaker for the first time with one of my favorite CDs, which was an artist called Mark Cohn. You may remember him walking in Memphis. He won a Grammy back in the early 90s for Best New Artist at the time. And his music was very important to me and spoke to me. And when I played it on the MBL system, I was in tears, honestly. I can still get chill, the hairs on the back of my neck still stand up remembering those moments. I think we all have those who are interested in hi-fi, at least the people who are really interested in music and emotional connection to the music. A lot of guys in our industry, they're listening to the gear, not necessarily to the music that's coming through the gear. So the MBL just completely disappeared from the room. Sonically, there was no, you couldn't identify where the sound was coming from. It was just there. And it almost sounded like there was spotlights on things in the sound stage that I had never heard from any other high performance system in my life. None of the other systems at the show even approached the idea of the way that this speaker just completely disappeared and was so transparent and revealed so much information, but not in a glaring or etched way like often happens, unfortunately, with high performance systems, even today. We've all experienced, those type of systems where they're exciting for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they get fatiguing or boring, or you move 1 centimeter to the left or to the right out of the equilateral triangle, and the whole soundstage collapses, and you just hear one speaker. Sort of the magic disappears. And with this MBL, I'm walking around the room and sitting in different parts and in the corner, and I'm like, this is crazy. It's like I'm at the concert sitting left of the stage and I'm getting the presentation. The sound stage is still in the middle. I'm just sitting off to the side. It was exactly as we all experience sound in nature in real life. So it was a seminal moment for me, for sure. And like I said, they kind of recruited me away from the Danish company I was working with, and worked for them for several years. And then most recently, this last go in 2011, MBL Germany, the manufacturing company, had changed hands from the original owners, and the new owner and I started a subsidiary company here for handling North American market. So we're called MBL North America, and we're a wholly owned subsidiary of MBL Germany. So I'm not a distributor that handles 10 other brands or jumps around from brand to brand depending on the market traction I'm able to get. I'm the MBL guy, and pretty much always have been in this industry.
So before we get into the current iteration of the 101, if you only had to listen to one album for the rest of your life, would it be the Mark Cohn or would it be something else? You ever thought about that?
Oh, sure. And when I was a kid, we still had FM radio broadcasts, and the local radio station had a desert album contest. So you would mail a letter or call into the DJ and sort of give them your 6 tracks on side A and whatever 5 tracks on side B of what your mixtape would be for the music that you absolutely had to have and would listen to if you were isolated and that was the only thing that you could hear. So for me, it varies. I love a lot of different genres of music. What speaks to me the most, though, are singer-songwriters and folk-type singers. They're also have the ability for most systems to sound very convincing and lifelike. When the music starts to scale up with orchestral and big bands and things like that, the hi-fi presentation, you have to work a little harder to believe it. But with somebody sitting and playing a guitar, it can fool you, especially the MBL speaker set up well. You can really be fooled that you're hearing something live happening in the room that you're in, and that's the magic, really. That's the trick of the MBL speaker, is that it merges the sound of the recording with the sound of the room that you're in. Most of what we hear with all speakers is the actual room. And this is also in life. If you're at a concert hall, it really depends where you're sitting, but you could be hearing up to 70-80% of the room reflected energy, as opposed to the direct sound of the actual instruments themselves. So the MBL speaker is mimicking sort of this way that we hear in nature, which is always a blend of direct sound and reflected sound that's coming milliseconds later. And what these exact facsimiles of the direct sound do for you is they're building density of tone colors and sound staging and things like this, and sound pressure. So this is really the magic that the MBL speaker does, like no other speaker does, in the way that it loads the room in this omnidirectional character.
And the 101 is kind of the flagship that everybody is familiar with. That's
Correct.
the one behind you, correct?
This is the extreme version, which is a 4-tower Diapolito configuration of the Omni mid-range tweeter and woofer here. There's another section here down below that you can see. And then there's a separate column of subwoofers. These are 4 towers that weighs 1 ton. They're 6 feet tall each.
Wow.
So this is called the 101 Extreme. And then there's the 101 current version called the E Mark II, which is just the one set of the 3 Omni drivers, like this lower section, and then it's sitting on a cabinet that has a subwoofer in it. So it's a 4-way passive loudspeaker, the 101 E Mark II, and that's what we'll be showcasing at AXPONA this year in Suite 1527. We have a large room with the 101 bass system, and then we also make 4 smaller versions of the 101. So we'll have our most compact speaker, sort of the entry-level MBL, in the smaller room attached to the suite. So attendees will be able to walk between the rooms and really hear a lot of the similarities, the sound character, the presentation. The tweeter and the mid-range drivers are the same on all the loudspeakers, the $14,000 entry level and the $400,000 extreme system, all share the tweeter and mid-range. So above 600 hertz, they're all behaving exactly the same way. It's really how they're handling the bass and the size of the room volume that they can pressurize is what changes across the models. So in essence, there is an MBL speaker that is appropriate for the room size that it's being placed in. So we don't encourage our customers who have a very small room to try and shoehorn a large speaker in. You can, and people do, of course. But there is an appropriate size speaker for a given room dimension and volume where the speaker is comfortable and can pressurize the room in the way that it's designed to do, and can still disappear and get out of the way, and just leave music behind so you're not aware of a sound source in the space.
So there's 3 different variations: the 126, the 101E Mark II, and then the Extreme.
There's actually 8 different. We call them radial strawlers.
Okay, take me through that real quick.
Yeah, sure. So the 126 is the smallest speaker. He has the same radial tweeter and radial mid-range that all of the loudspeakers share. He's got a hybrid bass system, so the cabinet is a pyramid shape. You have a picture of that I sent you. The cabinet is a pyramid shape, and it has some side-firing aluminum cone woofers that are working in a push-push manner. So you got 180 degrees of radiation in the bass on one side of the cabinet and 180 degrees of radiation of the bass on the other side of the cabinet, and we stitch it together in the crossover so that the timing and the speed and the weight are matched with the true Omni tweeter and mid-range. So the 126 is a compact speaker. It just was awarded, I don't know, it's multiple Golden Ear Awards from the Absolute Sound magazine. It's about 14 inches tall. It's really a compact 3-way. It can stand on a stand or on a shelf. It can hang upside down from the ceiling, so people can use it in a multi-channel setup and have the rears on the ceiling or on the side walls hanging and things like that. Then there's a 120 MBL, which is same tweeter and mid-range, bigger cabinet, larger woofers, will play louder and fill a larger volume of space and plays lower in frequency in the room. Then there's a compact floor stander, which is the 116. And he, again, has the radial tweeter, radial mid-range, side-firing mid-bass system as described with the smaller speakers. And then he has a 4-way now with 2 8-inch woofers on the side of the cabinet working in this same push-push manner to create the omnidirectional presence of the bass. Then there's the 111, which is a larger version of the 116. Now it's a 2-box system, like an old Watt Puppy kind of thing from Wilson. So you had the head unit that had the radial tweeter, the radial mid-range, the side-firing mid-bass drivers in a sealed acoustic suspension cabinet. And then it sits on top of the subwoofer cabinet that has now 2 times 10-inch aluminum cone drivers on the sides towards the floor that are working in this push-push manner. Then you get to the 101E Mark II, which the real distinction is this omnidirectional woofer, this large silver driver here. That's by far the most complicated, most expensive to manufacture, and all these drive units and magnets, we make everything in house. There's no off the shelf parts here. So we have our own factory. It's kind of an old school German vertically integrated company. So we have the CNC machinery. We build the circuit boards. Everything that we can do under our roof, we do at MBL, and that's how.
And where's all that built?
The company's based in Berlin, and our factory is about 45 minutes on the Autobahn outside of Berlin in a small shipbuilding town called Eberswalde. It's near the Polish border. It was the former East Germany.
Okay. And not only, do you have the whole line of speakers, but you also have electronics, and not your speakers are unique, very uniquely. You have the most unique speakers I'm pretty sure I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Something that everybody always talks about at the shows, but your electronics also have the same type of like build quality and looks to them, where they just look amazing. But I personally didn't even know that you were doing electronics, and so I'm very interested. I'm looking at some of the pictures you sent me of the network player and the amp. So maybe if you can run me through a little of your electronic line, because they look amazing.
Sure. I just want to say one other thing about the loudspeakers.
Sure.
After the 101E Mark II, you go then to this 101 Extreme version, which is the extreme expression of the MBL technology. So you have a mirror array of the mid bass, mid range tweeter, and then underneath another tweeter, mid range woofer. So this is in its own massive structure tower, as you can see behind me. So you have a higher sensitivity to the speaker and a larger sound stage, a larger sweet spot, and it can project the tone and the pressure much more effortlessly deeper and further into the room, especially in a larger room. This becomes an issue with speakers that can't quite project all of the frequencies at the same time aligned to arrive at the listener anywhere in the room. And then he has outboard active subwoofers. There's 3 cabinets stacked. That's the big black tower back here. There's 3 cabinets stacked on top of each other, and you can see there's side firing 12-inch double aluminum membrane sandwich drivers on each side of the cabinet. So you have 2, 4, 6 12-inch woofers on each channel, each side of the loudspeaker. So 12-inch active woofers in the bass system on the Extreme.
That is extreme.
It is. But you have total control over it. He has the tone controls and timing and relative volume. He runs completely separately from the Omni system. He gets his own line level signal from the same preamp that the rest of the system is getting. So you really dial him in as a separate entity into the room, and then the Omni system comes in as a separate, and it all you dial it in and tune it so that it all works, speaks as one. And then there's 2 THX spec center channel versions of the compact speakers, the 120 and the 126, that can be used for center channels. They're designed, the stereo pairs are designed to disappear and sound not there. Whereas with a center channel in a multi-channel setup, you want it to sound absolutely right there. For the dialogue and whatever the director's chosen to steer to the center channel. So that makes rounds out the 8 different loudspeakers that we make.
I would love to see this or hear this in a surround set. I just I didn't know that you did that. I didn't know you had a center.
Yeah.
Or that you had, the only ones I've ever seen are the ones at the shows, which are the big towers, the ones behind you, and the one, the next one down. But, I would love to hear this in a surround system with the bookshelves coming from the ceiling and the Atmos speakers. Now, that would be an incredible. Have you heard this in that?
Absolutely. It's an amazing immersive experience. Like you brought up Atmos. Atmos is trying to make this sort of immersive experience with sound coming from 10 degrees and 30 degrees and all these different angles around you. Our speakers are doing that inherently. So you don't need 64 channels and speakers all around you to have this effect. It's kind of baked into the cake with the MBL speaker. So I can put 5 of our speakers in a room. Maybe you need a subwoofer outboard for LFE effects, and you will not miss 64 channels. You just feel like you're swimming in this infinite sound field. You're not aware of walls. You're not aware of speakers. You're not aware of ceilings. Even if the rear channel is right behind you. We have customers, that limited space. The rear channel often has to be very close to the back head of the viewer listener, and the speaker, you're not even aware that it's there. It's really incredible. We have done a few times at exhibitions at other regional shows where we've had 5 channels, 7.4 channels. We haven't done a quote unquote Atmos presentation as of yet. But as I said, everything kind of sounds like Atmos inherently anyway.
I think just hearing in a 5-channel setup like somewhere would just be amazing.
It's pretty incredible. I'm trying to think. I don't think I have a dealer right now that has a multi-channel on display, but most dealers are capable of setting this up. So if a customer is interested in hearing such, it could be arranged ahead of time to be set up this way. But yeah, it's really an amazing experience with multi-channel. Even with multi-channel music, it blows the walls and the ceiling and the floor. Everything disappears.
Not usually what I'm into. I'm a 2-channel. My surround system is two channel, but sometimes when you see stuff like this, and you just kind of want to know what it sounds like.
It's very effective, and I have a small theater in my home, and there's not room to put these MBL speakers because they're not in wall or on wall kind of speakers. They have to be in the room space. So it's not appropriate for every space. But
so what about the electronics? I'm very interested in those.
The electronic story is the company was a loudspeaker company from the get-go. Like I said, the concept for the way the tweeter functions was awarded a U.S. patent in 1979, and it took 6 years to get it off the paper. But one of the problems that was encountered immediately was in the marketplace. Now, you're talking mid 80s now. In the marketplace, there really weren't very high end, very high quality, very powerful amplifiers available. So the idea was, from the calculations and the thinking of the engineers, they knew that this speaker could perform way better than any of the electronics available at the time would allow them to perform. So we designed an amplifier that was the 9011, which an earlier version of the 9011, which I sent you the pictures of, and which we will be showing in the larger room at AXPONA, driving the 101E Mark II. That's the big mono block amplifier. So we were sort of out front and early with the very large mono amplifiers. One of the not a limitation, but a factor that has to be considered with the radial Strahler technology is that you don't have a box, a cabinet like conventional speakers have to build pressure and then force it out into the room with your drive units. We're pressurizing the actual room with the drive units. So there's no cabinet here. These are the drivers. So it is a task for an amplifier, especially with this large, the units that have this large mid-bass driver. He has a 6-inch voice coil, and the radiating surface area of the membrane is the equivalent to 2 12-inch woofers. So this becomes and then there's also a 6-inch voice coil and a down-firing woofer in the 101E Mark II cabinet and the earlier 101 versions as well. So this is all our speakers are a very benign 4 ohm impedance load, but the larger ones especially do require an amp that has a very good control and high damping and grip and speed and all these aspects that we all love to have in our hi-fi systems. So our amplifier was born out of necessity, basically. And then you need a preamp, to match the amplifier. Nobody was making this quality that we wanted, so that became the preamp, which the 6010D is our reference level preamp. He's been in production in the same form factor and very similar sound for over 35 years. Still one of our best sellers. Very, very popular preamplifier. And then the same story with the D-to-A conversion and the CD transport. So that's how this MBL evolved into becoming also an electronics manufacturing company. So we do have 3 levels of electronics. There's the reference line that I described, and these were the first developed products. They were cost no object, make the amp as well as an amp can be made and have it be powerful enough to control difficult load loudspeakers. Back in the day when it was first produced, the Apogee, I think it was called a Stage or a Scintilla. There was a large Apogee ribbon speaker, 8 feet tall or something, with full range ribbons that had a 2 ohm impedance, and no amplifier could really control it. So the reference mono amp is stable at 2 ohms, which is very unusual even today for an amplifier. So that was also used to drive the B&W 801 and the B&W 800, which back in the day were notoriously difficult loads for an amplifier to control. And the big amps they're just coasting. You can throw anything you want at them, and they don't stress at all ever. So then we had a sort of a trickle down concept, building more to price points and scale size of electronics. So we have the Noble range, which is just under the reference line. And then we also brought out a more entry level range called the Cadenza line, which is part of the system we're showing in the smaller room at AXPONA.
So you have one of the most interesting looking systems and good sounding systems that you'll see at any show. But what are the reactions like when people come into your rooms?
Well, we from a design and a brand philosophy, we want to give these are luxury products, these are expensive products, and we believe that you should have it all, and that the products you should be proud of them and not want to hide the boxes in the closet, or your wife doesn't want them on display. For us, it's industrial art, and it should look as good as it sounds. So that is definitely part of the industrial design concept behind. First, the sound quality and the electronic portions are designed, and then the chassis are designed to work around the circuit design necessity. So at the reference level, the products are quite large physically because we need the space to do what needs to be done for the circuitry that's inside. So it is a system approach. It's not a closed system. You don't have to use our electronics with our speakers and vice versa. But we do show most of the time as MBL as a brand. So we do show a complete MBL system at whichever level the room is appropriate for and the show needs are. So there are special finishes. We have a lot of piano lacquer. The components all come in a lot of standard finishes of piano black, piano white, piano silver. We can match any RAL paint code. So you want to match your Ferrari red or your purple in the drapes or the sapphire ring or whatever you want to do. We can make the whole system that color, which is really can be very beautiful and exciting and unique for customers that are interested in that. And then we have some metal plated options. There's some gold plated trim options, some chrome plated trim options, and things like that. So for me, that's the most exciting part of attending these shows. We do a lot of shows. There are a lot of work. There are a lot of expense. There are a lot of energy requirements. But for me, the greatest joy in presenting the systems is that reaction that you immediately feel from somebody, an attendee who's walked in the room, even in the doorway, especially if they've not heard or seen MBL. It's a known entity, but not very many places where you can hear it or see it. So at the shows, it's often a first time experience for an attendee who's read about it or heard somebody talk about it, but they've not actually seen it or heard it in person. So this for me is a great moment at the shows that I get to share with people when they first get, we call it, you get MBL'd. So it's often, it's not for everybody, but for most people, it's a stunning and like I described, a sort of a life-changing and a very memorable moment. We often have grown men crying while they're listening in our room. This happens regularly at shows. Usually to significant others, that we used to joke about the wife acceptance factor of products.
Yeah, what is the wife acceptance factor for these? I'm very curious on that.
Extremely high. We can watch from the hallway outside the room when attendees are walking by, and oftentimes the wife's kind of dragging behind and not so interested in what's going on. And there's a lot of technical reasons for that we can get into as well. But the visual of the look is very, very appealing to the significant others who may not otherwise be interested in the black boxes or the big tower things that just look like, unfortunately, a lot of clunky and not very well executed industrial design. So the reaction is very, very positive. Many wives drag husbands or significant others into our room if they might not have even otherwise stopped by for whatever their reasons are. The wives, absolutely. And part of the reason for this is sort of stereotypically talking, women genetically and evolutionary wise are more sensitive to the high frequency sounds than men are. So the way that the MBL speaker projects sound and loads the room is never beaming at you like a conventional driver or a tweeter, for example, is beaming at you. It's launching, this way at a very specific point. There's a very narrow window where it's actually in phase and accurate, and the farther off axis that you are from that point, it starts becoming more and more out of phase and more diffuse. That's not how we hear naturally. But this beaming of the treble especially can become very irritating and annoying, especially on more contemporary music that tends to be compressed, highly compressed, and everything sounds too loud. There's no breathing room or space sonically of silence between notes, between instruments. So this can get very agitating, especially for someone who has more sensitive high frequency hearing. So an MBL system, you don't get that presentation at all. So there's no fatigue from it. There's no beaming. You don't have to sit in the exact sweet spot to enjoy the presentation. You can pretty much sit anywhere in the room. We like to say that it's a system that you live with. It's not a system that you live for. So you can live your life around it. You can get up and dance. You can move around. Even in the sweet spot, there is, of course, a sweet spot. We're playing mostly stereo recordings, so this is built into what we're trying to present. But you can, get emotionally involved and dance and move and have a good time, and your sound stage is relatively stable. You're not aware that you're listening to a speaker and, oops, I moved too far, below the tweeter or too far above the tweeter, and I'm getting assaulted by, the high frequency information, which can make you nervous and agitated over time. In our experience, women tend to gravitate strongly towards the speaker, and I think it's for that reason. The lack of this beaming quality to the treble. It has a very natural treble. It rolls off in the treble in a very natural way. We're not trying to extend our tweeter to 40 kilohertz or even higher that a lot of our competitors are trying to do with dome tweeters. This is not how we hear sound in nature. There's frictional losses. If a violin is playing in your room, by the time the high frequency arrives to you, it's hit the air and the pressure in the room, and you're not getting 20 kilohertz or 22 kilohertz, certainly not 40 kilohertz in the real world. So our speaker really works in this way. So it becomes a very relaxed and comfortable and familiar way to experience sound. So our goal is natural sound, and when set up properly, it's very capable of reproducing that. We have some issues sometimes at shows. Our rooms tend to be very popular, and people don't leave. They sit for very long periods of time because they're enjoying and having a good experience. So people will move around. I encourage people to move around the room so they can understand that, you know, you're not locked into the sort of head vice of the equilateral triangle, and still have you know, a natural you know, quasi-realistic presentation. I mean, the whole thing is artifice, right? So if you have to sort of surrender to the idea that you're listening to phantom sources, and you're trying to trick your brain and your heart into believing that you're hearing real sources that would be different in the room. They would project in a similar manner, but they would be very different. The localization would be different. You know, everything about it would be different. So we can tell how listeners are listening. Most of us have been conditioned from a young age to listen cerebrally. You're looking at two speakers. You're saying, okay, left and right, and I'm going to hear a very focused center if it's well produced and the speakers are set up well. But you aren't listening with your heart at that point. If you're thinking about what you're hearing, you're not emotionally connecting to the music. So what our system is very unique at and very effective at when set up properly is that you can really listen with your heart, and you don't have to think about the sound stage. You don't have to think about, is this really happening, or is this an artificial event? So that, as I described earlier, is sort of the trick of the MBL speaker technology, is that it is capable of really producing natural sound in a natural way that is familiar to the way we hear in nature. And this is not a fatiguing sound. This is not a beaming or aggravating sound, given that the source obviously is is well made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds amazing, and I've been to the room in the show, and hopefully everybody that's watching this gets to experience it at some time or another. But I can't wait to see you guys at the show. I think it'll be a good time, as it always is. You guys do an excellent job. We're out of time for today, but I very much enjoyed having you on the podcast. I learned a lot about something that I've seen. Like, you see this stuff, and you're just kind of like, wow, look at that. And, maybe you listen to it, but you don't know anything about it. But when you can actually learn about it, it's just incredible. So thank you for, you totally explained it from, top to bottom. It was an amazing educational experience on such an incredible looking product line. It was a great time. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, and we'll see you at the show.
Yeah, from the Audio Insider podcast from AXPONA, my name is Lenny Florentine, and Jeremy from MBL. We thank you guys for watching. We will see you next time.